Peter here from the Esoteric Order of Gamers, and welcome! Today I'm going to do another game review, and it's all about Circadians First Light. It's by Garphill Games. You may have seen my video review of Circadians Chaos Order, which is an excellent game that I've played quite a lot now. I really enjoy it. This one was done before that game. It's the first one in this Circadian series. And I keep thinking of Kardassians. It's ridiculous, isn't it? You know, the space explorations of the Kardassians. It just doesn't bear thinking about. Anyway, Kardassians First Light. No, Circadians First Light. Kardassians. Oh dear, what am I doing sitting here reviewing games on a Saturday afternoon? I'm a crazy man. Anyway, we're going to check out this game. I'm going to give you a rough idea of how it plays, and then I'm going to tell you what I think of it. Stay tuned. There's going to be lots of fun to follow. So hang in there for Circadians First Light by Garphill Games. So let me tell you about First Light. I'm just going to call it First Light from now on. I think it's safer for everyone concerned. Basically, you are the Circadians, who seem to be humans, who have found this planet called Rai. Or Rur, or Reh. It's pronounced no, it's not pronounced. I don't know how it's pronounced, but it's spelt R-Y-H. Anyway, you've discovered this planet. There are some alien races on it, and you're apparently peace-loving, intelligent, wonderful people. So what do? You exploit the hell out of the planet. This is a strange thing about this game, and I'll get into it later. There's a bit of a thematic dissonance here, in that you're really supposed to be these wonderful people who are negotiating with the locals, and you're lovely and everything, but at the same time you're harvesting all their resources and stealing their gems. It's weird. Anyway, theme aside, what we're doing here is rolling dice. We're assigning dice to various places, and we're doing resource management, and we're getting victory points. And there are lots and lots of really interesting ways to do that in this game. So this is our setup. In the center is the world map, and you'll have a harvester on here, which you'll send to the various places on the map and harvest resources. You also have over here a spaceport board, which is divided into two areas, the depository and the headquarters. You've got a negotiations board where you can get lots of points if you negotiate with the poor locals. And you've got a number of special boards around here, which are places where you can send your dice as well. You've got the academy, the control room, market, mining camp, laboratory, and foundry. I'll explain all those later on. Each player has a nice little player screen, and behind that you have your research base. And the research base is where you'll be placing your rolled dice, either in the garages, and then you can send them out to various locations in all these areas here, or on your farms so you can get resources. There's a selection of leaders available. You can draw one of these randomly or pick one, and they'll give you special game-changing abilities. And when I talk about resources during the game, we've got energy, water, algae, and gems. And they come in these very nice little containers. So let's go through a turn, and you can see how it all works. It's not very complicated, but there are lots of kind of fiddly things to remember, which you can easily get the hang of. I found that it flowed very nicely after just a turn or so. The first thing you do in each round is reveal an event. Now, a game lasts 7 rounds, and this is kept track of through these event cards. You draw one of these at the start of each round, and the end of an era card is always at the bottom of the deck, but these ones are random from a selection. And that will just give you a little modifier during each round. Once you've done that, everybody rolls their dice. You start with 3 dice, and you roll them behind your screen so your other players don't see the values. Then you assign these rolled values to either your garages or your farms. When you assign them to your garages, you always have to assign them from the leftmost space to the rightmost space. When you assign them to your farms, you can assign them to any space, any farm space that you have. Then you move on to the execute phase. Everybody removes their player screen so you can see the values and where they're being placed on your board. The first dice that are placed at the start of the execute phase are those that were placed on the headquarters board. I'll explain that a bit later, but it allows you to get the jump on your opponents. But players take turns sending out dice from their garages. Now, sometimes there's a resource cost to do so. It depends on the garage that you have. And of course, you can upgrade your garages and farms as you go through the game. So you can get one of your dice with a certain value, and you can assign it to one of these station boards or to space on the spaceport or perhaps the negotiation board. There are heaps and heaps of choices. And when you place the dice, you get to execute whatever that dice allows you to do in the particular location you've placed it. Finally, there's a harvest and rest phase. The first thing you do is harvest on the planet. As I mentioned before, depending on the location of your harvester, you get the resources from that space. When you set up this world board, there are also some resources placed on some spaces which you can grab straight away. But during the resource phase, you can also take the resources that are printed on the space where your harvester is. Then everybody at the same time gets to harvest the resources from their farms, depending on the dice that they've placed on the particular farms. Finally, there's a rest step and everybody gets their dice back. Now, if you place them on the headquarters, they'll be staying there until the next turn, which I'll explain in a moment. If you place them on any of the depository spaces, you won't get them back for the rest of the game. The same with the negotiations board. You never get those ones back as well. So that's a turn. Pretty straightforward. Now, the complexity, of course, is what all these spaces do where you place your dice. So let's get into that. Now, I mentioned the headquarters. Now, when you place dice here, it allows you, as I said, to get the jump on your opponent's next turn. So if you place a dice in the first space, that means next turn, you'll be the first person to be able to move that dice onto another location. It'll be very crucial to get that particular space that you want, and this is a good way to make sure that happens. You also get to get one of these contract cards, and you get 5 water. Let's check out the mining camp. Another wonderful thing that the Circadians are doing, they're mining the planet for gems. So if you place dice here, depending on the space you place it, you'll be able to get a number of gems. Very useful resources. However, it will cost you a certain amount of water, depending on how high the value of the die is that you place on this board. Next, we've got the laboratory, and you can see on here there are 3 piles of farms on here. Now, this board is a little bit different in that you have to place 2 dice on it, and they have to be in succession on your garages to go out to the laboratory. If you place them there, you get to pick up one of the farms from one of the 3 piles here. And that allows you to upgrade your farms. There are 3 foundation spaces where you can place them. Well, they're not upgrading, actually, you're building new farms, and that will, of course, give you more resources if you assign dice to them later in the game. The foundry is a similar kind of thing, but it allows you to upgrade your garages. You change them from garages with a chariot or a car next to them to ones with a landing pad and a ship, so they give you more advantages. They can give you more resources and victory points and things like that. There are 4 garage spaces on your board that you can upgrade. Next, you've got a market board where you can exchange resources. This is very handy if you need to spend resources to get a particular thing and you're missing out on something. You can send a dice there and exchange resources for different resources. Now, as I mentioned, sometimes dice, when they get placed on boards, don't come back into your hand. So you're going to need more dice during the game, and for that you'll send dice to the Academy. Depending on the dice value that you play here, it'll cost you a certain number of resources to get more dice. Now you'll be wanting to move your harvester around on the planet, and for that you go to the control room. Here it is here. Depending on the dice value you place here, it dictates which direction your harvester moves on the board. It'll cost you a certain amount of energy or water. On the very periphery here are some gem caches where you can get a gem and a dice to add to your resources, but also if you're on them at the end of the game, you can flip them over and get victory points. So in general, it's better to get to the outer edges of the planet because the resource pickings are better and you can hopefully land on one of those caches at the end of the game for the extra points. Now, of course, it's all about scoring victory points. If you put dice onto the depository, you'll never see those dice again, but you do get an advantage for placing it on a particular row here, and you must be able to fulfill a contract. Now, you'll get a certain amount of these contracts at the start of the game, and they give you points, but you have to spend resources to get them. So you place a dice on here, you get a special little advantage depending on which row you place your dice, and you can fulfill a contract, or you have to fulfill a contract. So you've got to have the resources to fulfill one of the contracts in your hand if you're going to place a dice on the depository. Now, there's a huge range of these contracts, and they also give you advantages during the game as well, but primarily they're there for the victory points. The other way to get victory points is to send dice, and they never come back, to the negotiations board. And this is where you're negotiating with the 3 alien races already on the planet. And when I say negotiation, it's probably exploit and colonize. Anyway, maybe I'm just making that up. But when you go here, you have to spend a certain amount of resources to place a die on one of these spaces. And you also get to use the special ability of the faction when you do so. There's also some other tricky stuff here. There are advantages and setbacks here as well. if you place the first die of a certain value on this board, you get to move the cylinder from the left side of the board over to the right side and pick which advantage you get when you do so. However, if you place a die and the number in that column goes over a certain value, you'll also have to move over a cylinder from the setbacks column and get yourself a setback. So there are advantages and disadvantages to negotiating, but you also get lots and lots of juicy victory points. So that's it, pretty straightforward really. And at the end of the game, 7 rounds, you have a scoring phase. You score for your dice on the negotiations board. You score for your fulfilled contracts. You score if your harvester is on one of these gem caches. You turn it over and you can see the victory points you get for that. You score victory points if you've covered over a certain number of spaces on your research board with farms and garages. And you get 1 point for every remaining gem in your supply. The person with the highest number of victory points wins. So what do I think of Circadians First Light? Well, I like it. I don't love it, but I like it. And the reason I say I don't love it is because, well, I admire this game. It's very, very well designed. There's a lot of choices. There's a lot of things to do. Like all Garphill games, it's very clever. I mean, the fact that you have this wonderful resource system and these ways of getting points and these contracts to fulfill, and you're juggling lots of resources and you're deciding where you want to put your dice, all that kind of stuff is really, really clever. However, I prefer games that have a bit more of a tight link between theme and mechanics. And I just feel with this one, the theme doesn't really engage me too much. I mean, I love the idea of the theme. It's just it doesn't engage with the mechanics really well, in my opinion. Now, a lot of people aren't going to care about this because a lot of people just prefer the mechanics of games and how they play, and that's, as long as it has some kind of theme, they enjoy that, and that's great. However, as I'm sure you know by now, I am very concerned with theme in my games. I love to be really immersed in the game, and I like the mechanics and the theme to really work together so you feel like you're doing whatever it is the game wants you to do or says thematically that you should be doing. So in this one, even though we've got the idea that we have these research bases and we're sending out our crews to visit all these different locations and negotiate with aliens and everything and do all these things, I don't really feel like I'm kind of doing those things. There's a lot of emphasis on the fact that you've got your dice in these garages and they're going out. And in a way, this emphasis on garages makes me think, well, this could have been anything really. You could have been running a pizza delivery system in a big city and sending out your cars delivering pizzas to different places. Of course, that wouldn't be complex enough, but you get the idea. It really could have been applied to any number of themes. So I don't feel like I'm really immersed in this idea of negotiating and doing things on an alien planet. Even though I absolutely love the design, the graphic design is great. I really like the illustrations of Sam Phillips. Some people, for some reason, don't like his style. I think it's just lovely. It's lovely and clean and colourful, and it has that sort of sci-fi feel. It's great. In fact, he did Raiders of Scythia recently, which obviously isn't sci-fi, and they look beautiful as well. As an illustrator, I just think he's getting better and better every time. So I'm really happy with the look of it. It's great. And as I said, I like this game, and I would play it if I was in the mood, but I wouldn't sort of say, oh, I really want to play First Light for those reasons. I just don't feel that, well, I feel like the mechanics are okay and they're fun and it's an enjoyable game, but I don't feel like I'm immersed in the idea of colonizing and researching and, let's face it, exploiting this planet. So that's really my main problem with the game. Apart from that, it's enjoyable enough. I do feel that there's a real potential for analysis paralysis here. You roll your dice and then you really have to make decisions about where they're going to go to get all your different resources, how you're going to upgrade things, where you're going to send them out to and everything. And of course, when you roll them, you might place them in certain places with the idea that they're going to go somewhere, and then someone else might either take those spots or the whole makeup of the game might change a little bit. You might change your mind and decide to send it to somewhere else. And there are a certain number of restrictions on where you can send these dice, so you can change your mind midstream quite a lot. It's very clever how you've got the headquarters that you can send a dice to and then get the jump on your opponent's next turn to send out a dice beforehand. Look, it's all fun. But yeah, I don't know, there's just something missing. I think there's a certain dryness to it in this selection of things you do, this maximizing of your turns, of your dice. And remember, you're dependent, of course, on what you roll. So it's hard to sort of say, oh, I'm particularly going to follow a particular strategy, because you're rolling dice and you're getting certain values, and that's definitely going to push you in a certain direction to do certain things, which is fine. I mean, I love the random element, but I must admit, on my first game, I had some things I wanted to do in the last turn, and I managed to roll 4 ones, and I couldn't do any of them. So if you've got a problem with luck, you might have a problem with this, because obviously what you roll on the dice is very important. Though you can modify the values with various things you have. When I did that, I didn't have anything that I could modify the values with. But you do have a certain amount of control, obviously. So really, to sum it up, it's quite simple, my review of this game. I think it's good. I think it's clever. I will play it again if I'm in the mood for this kind of almost nitpicky decision-making about where I send things and what I do and everything. But when it comes down to it, it has that bit of dryness, because you are just going for victory points in the end, adding up victory points. And you know how I'm not crazy about games that just give you victory points. I like a sort of theme, a bit of a story, real immersion. This didn't have that level of immersion for me that made me think, oh, I really want to play this all the time. Unlike Circadians Chaos Order, which for me is really immersive, because you feel there's a point to everything. Everything that you do, even though in that game there's still a lot of micromanaging of things, you do feel like there's a purpose. You're trying to get control of these different relics, and there's combat and everything, so you're building up your forces to get strong in combat. There's sort of this forward momentum to that game that I don't think this one has quite as much. So, as I said, good game, like it, don't absolutely love it, but I do love the stuff that Garphill games do. When they tip over into the really more complex, drier, victory point, resource management stuff, they start to lose me, just because that's not my personal preference in gaming. Now, some people love those type of games, and I'm sure a lot of people would absolutely love this game and not worry about the fact that in my personal opinion, it's a bit dry. So there you go, Circadians. See, I've remembered how to say it now. First Light, another lovely production from Garphill Games, and I do have to say their production is gorgeous, very professional. The artwork's great, as I said, in my opinion, and all the components are lovely. It comes with a very nice insert. They have individual little component trays that come with it. It's all absolutely gorgeous. This is second edition, and that really shows there's a lot of care that has gone into this production. There you have it, folks. I'll be talking about more Garphill games in the future. They sent me a box of stuff, which I'm slowly going through and playing and enjoying. And as I get to play them, and as I get to make rule summaries and references for them, I'll be talking about them and doing video reviews as well. Of course, I've got a rule summary and reference out for Circadians First Light. It's already on the website, so please go check it out and download it. You might find it very useful indeed if you play the game. And while you're there, check out the other 450 or so rules and references there. You can download and print out and put in your games, and they will make playing and learning games a lot easier for you. There's also heaps and heaps of videos there. I've done about 500 in the past. Subscribe to this channel, check out my social media, and I've got a Patreon channel if you want to support the Esoteric Order of Gamers. I will see you next time. Good gaming, everybody. Bye for now. And remember, it's Circadians First Light, not Kardassians First Light.